Good morning. Today we learn about the consequence and drawbacks of the revolt of 1857. Consequence. The result of the revolt of 1857 is termed as consequence of the revolt of 1857. After the suppression of the revolt of 1857, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act of 1858, and according to the Government of India Act of 1858, the British Parliament introduced some administrative reforms in India. So, first we learn about the administrative reforms. The provisions of the Government of India Act of 1858 are: first one, end of companies rule. As per the Government of India Act of 1858, administration of India was transferred from the hands of East India Company to the British Crown. British Parliament took over the administration of India. Earlier, East India Company was ruling over India, and now the British Parliament took over Indian administration. Second, to run the administration of India, a new office was created, that is, the Secretary of State for India. The Secretary of State is a member of the British Cabinet, and he is responsible for the Indian administration. So, second provision of the Government of India Act of 1858 is creation of a new post, that is Secretary of State for India. Third one is the salaries and allowances of the Secretary of State for India would be paid from Indian revenue. Fourth, an India Council would be created. The Act provided that there shall be an India Council of 15 members in order to assist the Secretary of State for India. To assist the Secretary of State, a 15-member India Council would be created. The next one is administration of India shall be carried on as earlier by the Governor General. When the East India Company was ruling over India, the executive head in India was a Governor General, and the same way, the Governor General will carry on the administration in India, but a new title was given to the Governor General, that is Viceroy, and thus Lord Canning was appointed as the first Viceroy, and the British promised under the Act of Government of India Act of 1858 that appointments in India would be made on the basis of competitive examinations. So these were some of the main provisions of the Government of India Act of 1858. And these provisions we can better call as administrative reforms. So it is important. If a question is asked, what were the administrative reforms introduced by the British after the revolt of 1857? You must mention the above set points. The next consequence of the revolt of 1857 is Queen Victoria's proclamation. Queen Victoria was the then Queen of England, and she made a proclamation regarding India. And this proclamation was announced by the then Viceroy Lord Canning on 1st November 1858. And some of the assurances given by Queen Victoria to the Indians. First one, the British shall not interfere in the social and religious matters of Indians. British shall not interfere in the social and religious matters of Indians. Secondly, they would treat Indians and Europeans as equals. Again, she made the assurance that a general pardon would be granted to all the Indians who participated in the revolt of 1857, except those who were found guilty of murder. And next assurance given by Queen Victoria was the British government would do its maximum in order to develop industries in India. Again, the British would undertake works of public utility in India. These were some of the assurances given by Queen Victoria in her proclamation. The third consequence of revolt of 1857, end of Mughals and Peshwas. The Mughal rule and Peshwaship got over after the revolt of 1857. Bahadur Shah II was the last Mughal emperor, and after the revolt of 1857, Mughal rule got over because Bahadur Shah Jafar was imprisoned and he was deported. So, thus the Mughal rule got over. Nana Sahib was the last Peshwa and he fled to Nepal after the failure of the revolt of 1857. Thus, Peshwaship also got over. Thus, the two formidable enemies of the British is Mughals and the Peshwa rule ended. Next consequence is divide and rule policy. The British continued the divide and rule policy even after the revolt of 1857. They sowed the seeds of hatred among the Indian people. They turned Indian princes against subjects. They turned caste against caste. They turned upper class against lower class. They turned religion against religion. Means mainly they turned the Hindus against the Muslims. Thus they applied the policy of divide and rule in India. The next consequence is a relationship with the princely states. After the revolt of 1857, the British promised that they would stop the policy of territorial expansion. And they promised that they would abolish the doctrine of lapse. Thus, territorial expansion and doctrine of lapse were abandoned. The next consequence is racial antagonism. Even after the revolt of 1857, the British followed their racial discrimination. They continued the racial discrimination. Always they discriminated the Indian people. The best examples of for the racial discrimination was they kept Europeans only boards or boards showing Europeans only in public places, in railway compartments, in hotels, restaurants, parks, like places. They placed the board writing Europeans only. That means wherever such a board was kept, only Europeans were allowed to enter. So thus they made a reservation everywhere for the Europeans and the Indians were not allowed to enter in such places. Next one is economic exploitation. We know that when the British came to India, they were exploiting India's resources. And after the revolt of 1857 also, they continued their policy of economic exploitation of India. Another important consequence is military changes. They introduced many changes in military. They wanted to stop further uprising against the British. That is why they reorganized the army. So many changes were introduced in the army. Some of the changes introduced in the army were: first one, they increased the number of European troops and decreased the number of Indian troops. They, before the revolt, the number of European troops were just 45,322 only, and this was increased to 65,000. And the number of Indian troops decreased from 2 lakh 40,000 to 1 lakh 40,000. Then again, they strictly followed a ratio in the military. They maintained the ratio of European soldiers to Indian soldiers in Bengal, that is 1 is to 2. 1 is to 2 was the ratio of European soldiers to Indian soldiers in Bengal. That means for each 2 Indian soldier, there shall be 1 European soldier. And in other parts of the country, it was 2 is to 5. That means for each 5 Indian soldier, there are 2 European soldiers. So this ratio they strictly followed and maintained till India's freedom, 1947. Again, they did not appoint any Indians to higher offices. In military also, they followed the policy of discrimination. Indians could rise up to the rank of Subedar only, and all the higher ranks were reserved only for the British. The sophisticated weapons and ammunitions were not placed under the charge of Indians. All the sophisticated weapons and ammunitions were placed only under the charge of Europeans. And an important change was that they wanted to stop the rise of nationalism. That is why they never placed any newspapers, journals, or magazines or nationalist publications under the reach of the Indian soldiers. They did not provide any of the magazines or journals or newspapers to the Indian soldiers. Thus, they kept the Indian soldiers away from the happenings around them. So these were some of the main changes introduced in the military. Next one is rise of nationalism. One of the most important and positive result of the revolt of 1857 is a rise of nationalism. The revolt of 1857 paved the way for a rise of nationalism. The heroic deeds and the sacrifices made by Mangal Pandey, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Nana Sahib, like nationalist leaders, give an inspiration to the future generation and the future freedom fighters to fight against the British and for to fight for the Indian freedom. And a negative impact of the or negative consequence of the revolt of 1857 was the revolt of 1857 widened the gulf between Hindus and Muslims. The British, as a result of their divide and rule policy, were able to increase the gulf between Hindus and Muslims. During the revolt of 1857, both Hindus and Muslims fought shoulder to shoulder against the common enemy, that is British. But the British were successful in establishing their policy of divide and rule, in executing their policy of divide and rule. Thus, they created disunity between Hindus and Muslims. So, this disunity between Hindus and Muslims is one of the negative result of the revolt of 1857, whereas a rise of nationalism is the one of the positive results of the revolt of 1857. So these all are the results of the revolt of 1857. Our next topic is drawbacks of the revolt of 1857. Drawback means failure of the revolt of 1857. So in drawback of the revolt of 1857, we learn about the causes for the failure of revolt of 1857. Some of the main causes for the failure of the revolt of 1857 are: first one, lack of common plan of military actions and lack of centralized leadership. Indians started a revolt against the British, but there was no centralized leadership. There was no single leader to coordinate the entire activities against the British. No efficient leader was there, and no common plan of military actions was also not there. People were not knowing how to fight and where to strike. These things were not knowing. They just joined the revolt against the British. So one of the main reasons for the failure of the revolt of 1857 was lack of common plan of military actions and lack of centralized leadership. Second one was a lack of common goal. Large number of Indians joined the revolt of 1857. When the Indian sepoys started the revolt, people from different parts of the country joined the revolt, but these people were not having a common goal. They were not knowing why they are fighting the war. They had only an anti-British sentiment. They fought against the British just because of their anti-British sentiments, and there was no common goal, common aim. And third one is superior resources of the British. The British possessed superior resources, or the resources of the British were superior in terms of men, money, material to the Indians, whereas Indians were having inferior resources. The equipments were war equipments and all these things were inferior to the British, and they possessed the services of men of exceptional abilities. That means they were having some good and skilled or expert military commanders or military genius like Nicholson, Havelock, Campbell, Outram, Lawrence, etc. were some men of exceptional abilities. So there is also another reason for the failure of the revolt of 1857. And another reason is the lack of nationwide dimensions. When the revolt was started by the sepoys, people from different parts of the country joined the revolt. People from different nooks and corners of the country joined the revolt. But people from every nook and corner of the country did not join the revolt. Many of the parts of the country remained aloof from the revolt. Many of the regions of the country remained untouched. So, lack of nationwide dimension is also a reason for the revolt of 1857. Another factor is the hostility of the Indians. A large section of the Indian society were hostile to the Indians. They were supporting the British, like some big landlords or zamindars, then moneylenders, like people were supporting the British because they were getting economic benefit from the British, and that is why they were supporting the British and they were opposing the revolt. They were against the revolt. So hostility of a section of Indian society was also another reason for the failure of the revolt of 1857. The next factor is a section of educated Indians were also not in favor of the revolt of 1857. They were of the opinion that the continuation of British rule would help the Indians for modernizing India. British rule will help modernization of India. That was their attitude, their opinion. So they were also not supporting the revolutionaries. So a section of the educated Indians were against the revolution. And one of the most important factors for the failure of the revolt of 1857 is starting the revolt before time. The revolt started before time. That means they fixed the soldiers fixed the date of revolution. Thus fixed the date as 31st May 1857. They decided to start the revolt on 31st May 1857, but unfortunately, some unexpected incidents happened. That means the Enfield rifle was introduced. As a result of this, the soldiers were not ready to use the cartridge, the greased cartridge, and due to that issue, the soldiers opposed the British, and all of a sudden they have to start the rebellion. So revolt started in before time, and that is one of the main reasons for the revolt of the failure of the revolt of 1857. So these are the main reasons for the failure of the revolt of 1857. So our lesson is over, and you read the lesson very well, understand the lesson, and solve the exercise. Find out the question answers and learn it very well. So thank you.